3 hours later.
Finally getting to read this book. Let the games begin.
24 hours later.
So, I read this book. Let's discuss. Hello friends, my name is Lauren and welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing my book review on the long-awaited, anticipated release, maybe my most anticipated release of this year, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. Now, before I jump into my full review, I just wanted to say that I know this book is super popular during this time and many people don't want to be spoiled, so for this video I'm going to be starting off with my non-spoiler thoughts, and I will give a big notice beforehand when I jump into the spoilers. That way people can still get a gist of my opinions and what this book is about without having to be spoiled. So I just want to put that out there in case anyone wanted to make sure they won't be spoiled. Also, spoiler alert for my own opinions, not for the book. I didn't really like this book all that much, so if any of my opinions are offending anyone, please don't take offense because they're just my own, but I thought I would put that out there. So before I jump into my own personal opinions, let me just do a brief overview of what this book is about. So I'm not sure how much you guys know about this book, but this is the prequel to the original Hunger Games trilogy, which you can see over here. We follow the 74th Hunger Games, and in this book we follow the 10th Hunger Games, so it does take place quite a number of years in the past. So in this trilogy there is President Snow, who is the antagonist throughout the 3 books, and we follow him in this book when he's actually a teenager now, not when he's 80 or 90 years old. He has been asked to be a mentor in the upcoming 10th Hunger Games for his final school project, and he is assigned the District 12 female tribute, which is considered the worst tribute you could get in the Hunger Games. So he's already taken offense to that. And so in this book we kind of follow his life over a couple months, becoming a mentor in the games, what it means, and how his life kind of changes because of it and makes him into the person he becomes later on in the trilogies we know and love. That's essentially the main idea of this book. I don't want to say too much more because that's just what the synopsis gives you, but we follow President Snow in his life and his participation in the games, and let me just say, it's just, I don't even know. As I was reading this book, there was one word that stuck out to me the whole time: underwhelming. The more I kept reading, the more I kept impatiently waiting for something big to happen or some plot twist to come or something, and I kept waiting with not much payoff. That being said, I have decided at this point in time to give this book a generous 3 out of 5 stars. I might change my opinion later on and give it a 2.5 or something, because I do think a 3 stars is generous from me considering a lot of things I did not like in this book. There were some good things about this book and I will talk about them in a second, but the overall thing for this book, I'm not impressed. To dive a little bit deeper, all non-spoiler, don't worry, I'm just gonna do a brief overview of my thoughts on the world building, characters, and plot. So first, the world building, probably one of my favorite things about this book, if not my favorite. I loved how we got to see more of Panem and especially the capital, since in the original trilogy we only spend a small amount of time in the capital and it's very limited point of view, but since we follow a protagonist who now lives in the capital, the world is pretty cool to follow. Especially since this book takes place 10 years after the big war that happened, and we can see how the country is still trying to get back onto its feet, which I thought was pretty cool to read about, especially in the capital, which is known in the original trilogy for being almighty, all-powerful. And like I said, we follow the 10th Hunger Games, and there's a big difference in how the Hunger Games is run from the 10th Hunger Games to then the 74th Hunger Games, and it really shows that the Hunger Games at the beginning was very small and unimpactful, but then later on how crazy it is and how much it changes everyone's world. So I kind of liked that drastic difference there. One thing with the world building I did not like, or kind of in the writing I guess, would be the pacing or the amount of details we got. I think this is just kind of common in Suzanne Collins' writing, but there were so many insignificant details that just kind of bored me a lot of the way through. For me at least, it's always the dialogue that keeps me going, and this book, a lot of time there was a full page or 2 pages of just straight description of the world around, and I could not bring myself to just not kind of skim over it because there was nothing I really found of value there. Yes, I get it, you're building the whole scene, but I don't think I need all of those pieces of information to build the scene. I can fill in pieces of information myself. Maybe some people like it, but that wasn't for me. I also couldn't really bring myself to care about what was happening because I didn't care about any of the characters. No, I'm just gonna put this here because I don't have to keep holding it, so There we go. I did not like Coriolanus Snow or the students he hung out with, and most of the characters were like easily forgettable. The District 12 female tribute Lucy Gray and Snow's friend Sejanus do add a bit of spice into the mix, but even they really weren't my favorite. They were just the ones I hated the least. In terms of her writing specifically, I did not like her pacing, but I did like the fact that each of the chapters ended off with a cliffhanger. I think that's pretty common again in her writing because I think that happened in the Hunger Games. Every single time a chapter came to a close, there would be like some last line or piece of information that's like, oh, something new is happening. Gotta read that. And in terms of the plot, I often felt underwhelmed by what was happening. One thing I really enjoyed in the original trilogy was the physical games themselves, but in this book, in the beginning, I was kind of waiting for it to pick up. I'm like, all right, we're 100 pages in, like, I'm sure something has to happen now. And then the games happened, but then I wasn't that invested in it for some reason. And normally that's like one of my favorite parts. So the games, like I said, were kind of underwhelming as well, which was sad because I remember thinking like, I'm gonna wait for the games to kick in because that's when the book's gonna get really exciting. And then it kind of flopped a little bit. There were many things with the plot that happened, but for some reason, I just didn't care. I didn't care about all these different things happening. I didn't really feel any passion towards the book until a little bit later, which I'll get into the spoiler section, but for the most part, like I said, I found this book quite underwhelming. That's kind of all I have to say for non-spoilers. I do have a bunch of things I'm gonna say in the spoiler section, but if you guys have any questions for me regarding the book that you want to ask and not be spoiled for, just feel free to leave a comment down below in the description and I will be happy to answer those because I think those are all my overall thoughts. I wish there was just more in this book. Like, I don't want more. This book's already over 500 pages, but I wish I just felt more and cared a little bit more in this book. But anyways, like I said, leave a comment down below. I'll be happy to answer it. But for now, I will be getting into the spoiler section. So if you do not want to be spoiled, do not keep on watching. But if you read the book and want to come back, I will be happy to discuss all kinds of things with you guys. So without further ado, let's jump into the real reasons why I don't really like this book. Alright, so just to clarify, if you're watching this section, it is spoilers, so this is your last chance to leave now before I just dive right into some of the details. One of the biggest things I want to talk about first is the characters. And the fact that I didn't like any of them. Like I said before, if I had to choose, I would say Lucy Gray or Sejanus were the most interesting characters and kept my interest the longest, but I wouldn't necessarily call them my favorite characters. As for Coriolanus himself, I hated following his character. I made a video a couple months ago reacting to my thoughts on all the information we had been given about the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and when I heard that Coriolanus Snow, the antagonist of the original Hunger Games trilogy, from the moment I heard that, I was not happy about it. I thought there would be a way better direction to go in. And honestly, I stand by that. I still don't like his character and I didn't really enjoy that much following his perspective. I understand the significance of it because we get to learn a lot of backstory, we get to dive into the capital, but him himself leading the story, I did not enjoy. And also the fact that I just finished rereading the original Hunger Games trilogy and the fact that I loved Katniss Everdeen so much is just really disappointing for this book where I didn't like any of the characters. Honestly, I don't even have that much to say about any of the characters because none of them really interest me all that much. For Snow himself, I would say like, we get it, like yeah, he's poor, we get it, he likes Lucy, we get it, he's selfish. Everything he does is for his own self-interest and I was not vibing with that because while he is the antagonist in the later stories, this is his story right now and so many decisions he makes is all for his own self-interest. I'm like, he could have had a bit of redemption even though it was in the past, but something could have happened that made me want to root for him. Nothing really did. So considering I am a character-driven reader, I would say just from that alone, the fact that I didn't like the characters, it ain't it, you know, it ain't it. Something I did like, however, whoa, she likes something crazy, was the start of Act 3, where we go back into District 12. I really enjoyed that. For a moment, I almost thought I would start liking the book, but we can't get crazy here. I loved how we got to see the world in its previous state before we see it in the original trilogy because it was a lot more free and more fun than what we know it as. We got to see the hob, the seam, the meadow, the forest, even some Katniss plants. I really liked all those references to the original books, and it made it more interesting to read about for me. I also loved how we heard the songs Deep in the Meadow and The Hanging Tree, and especially the fact that we got to see how the Hanging Tree song was formed and why it makes so much sense. And the fact that these songs were then later carried down the road, even the mixed up versions carried later down the road, I thought was a really cool detail for Suzanne Collins to add. Whoa, a detail I liked? Didn't think that was gonna happen. Another thing I also liked is the fact that the 10th Hunger Games were just erased from existence, because one thing that is like said a lot in the original books is the fact that there's only one previous winner in District 12, which was Haymitch during the 50th Hunger Games. But in fact, there was actually a female winner on the 10th Hunger Games, regardless of how it happened and how she kind of cheated to get her way through, but still, there was another female tribute and it was just erased from history. And because of Lucy Gray, it makes me wonder how much of the District 12 people have suffered because of Cornelius Snow's broken heart. I'm wondering if that's why the fence was put around the district, because they went openly into the forest before, and I'm wondering if that's why there's so many strict guidelines, because he doesn't want anyone to break out of the molds that have been put in place. I also think at the end of the book, when he vows to never love again to protect himself, I was like, that makes a lot of sense in the original books, why he's such a piece of garbage. It was nice to see him vulnerable, but the vulnerability felt too forced, so I didn't really like it that much, but I appreciate the effort. And sort of transitioning from that, one aspect I didn't like in this book was the romance. It felt kind of lame and really forced, to be completely honest. Like, why does Snow like his tribute, and why does his tribute like him back? Like, especially since he's tried to close himself off from so many of his friends in the capital, why all of a sudden is he taking a liking to the District 12 tribute where he literally thinks of them as like less than human? And also, I don't know why she liked him back, really. Like, she had a very fun personality and wasn't gonna go down without a fight, but I think for me, the fact that she liked him back, I would have just believed that to be she was about to go die in the arena. She didn't really believe she was going to win for the longest time, and so I think she just wanted the extra love before she went in, but I didn't get the romantic vibe all that much. As for the plot in this book, I kind of already said I did not care that much. For some reason, my heart was not in the story. I just couldn't bring myself to care. But even though I didn't really care that much and wasn't that invested, there were still cool things that happened. Like I said before, I really enjoyed the kind of world building and how we see the games in the 10th Hunger Games and how they're not that well developed, and then how we can then see it later on to being one of the biggest deals in Panem. You can tell that the games are a lot better in the original trilogy just based on the fact that how the tributes are treated like relatively like human beings in the capital and are praised for their sacrifice and whatever, but it literally said normally the tributes would go into the arena the day after they arrive at the capital, really just making it seem just like a slaughterhouse, which is definitely how President Snow comes in there to kind of change up the games a little bit and make it more friendly for people to care about. I also like when Lucy Gray won and Snow was caught for helping her, and that scene where he goes into the dean's office and just sees the 3 pieces of evidence, he's like, it's over for me, I am done. I really enjoyed that. That was one of the first times it happened just before Act 3, and I was like, for the first time I feel something, I care about the book, which was nice to feel because this book is 520 pages long. I wasn't really all that happy about wasting my time reading this book, but I was happy I finally was excited about the story. Also, the dean, he's such a piece of garbage, and a lot of the teachers aren't that great either, and the fact that he was like taunting Snow from the beginning about how poor he was, I was like, this feels like some elementary school bullying. Like, why is he being so petty? Like, Snow's literally a teenager and you're an adult. Like, what gives? Overall, for this book, it's not my favorite thing. I think that's pretty clear. And I am very underwhelmed by what happened. I think the original trilogy is much better than this prequel, and I honestly would say if you don't really feel any big desire to read the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, or were maybe considering it, I would not recommend it. I know if someone were not to recommend me the prequel book, I would probably still read it anyways because it's the prequel to one of my favorite series of all time, but for someone who loves the trilogy so much, I am quite disappointed in how I did not like this book. There were some great world building things, and I loved going to District 12, and I loved seeing how the games were developed and how the world was being rebuilt after the war, and also how Snow himself started to get his viewpoints for how that later impacted him down the road. I liked those things, but overall I was underwhelmed, bored, and couldn't really bring myself to care about many of the things happening in the book, which is probably one of the biggest reasons why this rating is not anywhere higher, and surprisingly not any lower. But anywho, that is really all of my thoughts I can think about for the time being. Just like I said for the non-spoiler section, if you guys have any questions for me, just put like a spoiler alert at the top of the comments so no one gets spoiled, but I will be happy to discuss anything you guys want to talk about, so feel free to leave me a comment there and I would love to discuss and also hear your thoughts, and if you liked the book, and tell me why, because I would love to see what people liked in this book. Anyways, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I hope if you read this book that you enjoy it. For me, it just wasn't that great, but if you read it, I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you all very soon in a new video. So until then, bye!